Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I had to do another card for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. I just really liked the colors. And the other day I had seen a card that Yana Smakula had done, and I will link to that in my blog post. And I really loved how she combined this older sketch Ranunculus stamp set from Simon that is one of my favorite stamp sets. I've done multiple videos on this, and I'll have a couple linked at the end. But I love how she combined it with the new Dancing Fruit stamp set, and it just stuck with me. And I wanted to make a card similar. So I decided to pull these sets out today and combine them with the Color Throwdown Challenge because the colors were just perfect for this. So I have some masks for all these images that I had created with previous cards, and I always save my little post-it tape masks. I just put them on the backing sheet of the stamps, and you can see they've been stamped on multiple times. I've used these so many times, and that way it just saves me from having to remake masks every time I need one. I just keep reusing the old ones and then save them with the stamps. So I'm just stamping the images and then masking them off, and I'm stamping them with Simon Says Intense Black ink onto some Bristol Smooth cardstock here. And just kind of creating a cluster of these flowers, and then added that lemon from the Dancing Fruit set, and then adding some of the other little elements, the leaves and whatnot, to create this little cluster of images. So I thought about adding like more to like the top area, like having more than one cluster, but in the end I decided to just stick with the one. So I just kept going along and stamping until I was happy with how many like little elements and everything I had to kind of fill out this bottom corner of what will be my card front. And then I'm going to peel off all these masks to reveal the completed little scene, or whatever you want to call it, that I've created here. So once that's all done, I'm going to color these in with my Clean Color Real Brush markers. And all I'm doing is the same old, scribbling on the color and then pulling it out with my water brush. So I did the lemon first, and then for the Ranunculus, I'm using the same color of yellow. This is just lemon yellow, and then I'm using pink. And I scribbled on the pink and then added a little bit of that yellow just so they can kind of mix together, you know, and give it a little bit something different. So just scribbling on the color and then moving it around and mixing it together with my water brush. Really simple. That's another reason why I think I love this Ranunculus set so much, is you don't have to color, you know, really in depth or, you know, get really finicky with it and everything, because just the way the images are drawn, I think it's just easier to kind of slap the color on and get away with it. So I did one layer of color, and then I added a second layer with the same color markers just to really deepen and intensify it. It just makes everything kind of pop. So I used the same colors for the Ranunculus, the same pink, the same bright yellow. And then for the lemon, I went in with a darker yellow. So this time I'm using just the yellow marker. I made sure to quickly dry the flowers first because I didn't want the pink bleeding onto this lemon image if they were still wet. And then added that little bit of darker yellow and then pulled it out. And then for all the leaves and the greenery, I'm using May Green, and same thing, just scribbling the color on and then pulling it out with my water brush. Nothing too groundbreaking. These markers move really nicely on the Bristol Smooth, and it's just fun. So I went along, and I'm using a detail water brush here. This is the Tim Holtz one. Yeah, this is the Tim Holtz one. I really like this water brush. This is the one I use most of the time. People used to ask me about I have a yellow one. The water brush itself is yellow, and people would ask me about that. It's basically the exact same as this one. So I've used my yellow one so much to the point where I've started to like fray the tips of the bristles. So I've been using this one more lately just because the tip is like, the bristles are still in good shape. But yeah, this is my like go-to water brush. So I just went along adding in the color and then pulling it out with the water brush. And then as a final little addition to this, I pulled out, this is light gray, and just went lightly along the edges of the image and then pulled it out with a water brush until it just faded to nothing. Just keeping it really, really simple, but it just adds that little extra bit of depth without taking anything away from the image. And it keeps everything, you know, it gives it that little bit extra dimension. So just went along and tried to be kind of careful not to re-wet any of the areas where the color was, because these will reactivate easily and like the color will just pull out and you'll have a mess going on. So I did all that and made sure this was completely dry. And then I pulled out my Copic opaque white and put a tiny little bit of this onto an acrylic block. And then I'm going to thin it out with just a little bit of water, because otherwise it's just too thick to really do anything with. So I thin it out with a little bit of water, and then I pulled out my splatter cubby here, and well, you can't tell as much with the splatter cubby, but otherwise I would have it just splatter everywhere. And then I just dragged this brush against the edge of my acrylic block, and I've got, you know, a little bit of white splatter, and it just kind of finishes off this image. So I set that aside, let that dry, and then I have the Script Thanks die from Simon, and I pulled out some Stick It adhesive here, and then I have 3 pieces of white cardstock. So you peel off the backing. I'm going to stick my cardstock to this Stick It adhesive so that one side of this cardstock will have the adhesive on the back of it, because I want to stack these sentiments together, and because this is such a detailed sentiment, it's so much easier to do it this way than to try to fiddle around with liquid adhesive, you know, applying it. This works so much faster. So applied that, and then I just used my Teflon bone folder to really press that cardstock into the adhesive, and then I'm going to run that through my Big Shot machine so that I've got 3 die cut words here. So I'm going to pull these out of the die, and then poke out all the little center areas so that they're not sticking to anything. And then I can just peel the backing off of each of these die cut words, and that will reveal the adhesive, and then I can stack them together. So super, super simple. And with this adhesive, it's kind of repositionable at first. It gives you some time to kind of move things around. It's when you really press down that it becomes a permanent bond. So as long as you don't press down, you can kind of remove things and move them around a little bit and fiddle with it before it becomes like permanently stuck, and then you're just going to tear your cardstock. So I really like this. I always forget that I have it half the time, and that's why I usually stick to just using, you know, my liquid adhesives and whatnot. But for little die cuts like this that are a bit more finicky to stack together, the Stick It adhesive is wonderful. So I've got 3 layers of these die cuts stacked together. And then to complete my sentiment, I pulled out the Thoughtful Messages stamp set from Simon, and I had a little scrap of black cardstock left sitting here on my desk, so I used my anti-static powder tool with that, and then I inked up my sentiment with Simon Says clear embossing ink, and then stamped that onto the cardstock, and then I've got my white embossing powder from Hero Arts, sprinkle that on top, and then I can melt that with my heat tool here. And then once that's melted, I can funnel all my embossing powder back into the container, making sure this time not to dump it like I did in the last cards I made. So I've got that all put away, and I'm just rubbing off that anti-static powder with my fingers, and then I'm going to carefully line this up in my paper trimmer. I use kind of the lines on the trimmer as a guide, as well as the little line down the center to make sure everything's lined up, and then I can trim this into like the tiniest little strip here. And then once that watercolor image, once all that splatter was dry, I ran that through my machine as well with the largest die from the Simon WONKY Rectangles die set. And then I'm going to line up my sentiments, figure out where I want to put them, and then I'm going to just trim off this one end with my scissors, and then I'm going to adhere that into place with my Nouveau adhesive. So it's a really thin line of that, and then line that up on this card front here. I'm going to shift everything over so I can use my grid lines on my mat to make sure everything's straight, and then I can peel the backing off of this sentiment here, get the backing peeled off, and then that exposes the adhesive, and then I can adhere this into place as well. So making sure everything's like removed, all the little center areas and all that kind of stuff. And then I adhered it just so it starts at the very edge of that black cardstock strip there. So I did all that, and then I had to add some bling. So I have this pack of Rainbow Sparkle Mix jewels that I had picked up, and these are by Little Things from Lucy's Cards, and as always I'll have links below the video to all the supplies I used. But I pulled out several of the yellow, green, and pink ones, and a couple clear ones while I was at it. Just pulled those out and kind of sprinkled them rather liberally on this. I couldn't stop. I was only going to add, 3 or 5, and I just couldn't stop adding them. They're so pretty. So arrange them how I wanted on my card, and then I'm just using my crystal katana to pick up the rhinestone, put down a dab of that Nouveau adhesive, and then press those into place so they are adhered to my card front here. So getting all those adhered, and then I can let that sit and dry for a minute or so. And while that's drying, I'm going to finish my card base. So I've got some Simon Says Stamp bright yellow cardstock that I cut to 4 1/4 by 11, and then I scored it at 5.5 inches with my Teflon bone folder. So that will create a top folding A2 sized card. And then I'm going to line this up inside my mini Misty here because I want to stamp the sentiment with black ink. And most color cardstocks are a little bit more textured than like the smooth white we usually use. So I like to use my Misty because it's almost always guaranteed that I'm going to have to stamp this more than once. And with this I did. So I lined up the sentiment, and the sentiment is from that same Thoughtful Messages set. And I'm just inking it up with the Simon Says Intense Black ink and stamped it 3 times, I think altogether. 2 was probably good enough, but I stamped it 3 times to get it nice and crisp on the inside of the card. And then as a final little touch, I used that same lemon from the Dancing Fruit set. Line that up, and I'm just stamping it with some MFT Sunshine ink because that color of ink is very similar to this cardstock. It's hard to see in the video, you can kind of see it in the photos or whatever, but it just gives it that little extra something something. So I stamped that on the inside of the card, and that finished off the inside. And then to finish off the outside, I'm just going to adhere that watercolor card front with foam tape so that it's popped up from the card base. So just line that all with some foam tape and then adhere that onto the front of the card, and that finished it off. So like I said in the beginning, I will have a link to my blog post below the video, and in there I will have a link to Yana's card. Make sure to check it out if you haven't, because it's absolutely gorgeous. And I'll have links to the color challenge and all the supplies used, so all that info will be in the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time in the next video. Bye!